House in Baltimore and double to Miami. And, of course, on the backside of that, we're going to have about 10 straight days of baseball, but a few more late nights and an afternoon in Seattle after a bit of a lost weekend for the friends and family out amidst the gold jerseys in Oaklandia. Luke Jones joins us here to discuss all things weekend, and a very disappointing Friday evening sort of set the tone for sort of being stuck in the mud right now out on the West Coast, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I said it to you going into this Oakland series, got to win 3 out of 4. I mean, it's just, this is not a good team. They haven't been playing well. They traded at the deadline. They sold at the deadline. They're the second worst team in the American League, other than just the White Sox. And, you know, they had their opportunities. I mean, they should have won Friday night. Brad Brock blows a late lead in the 8th inning. And then Sunday, you know, they get off to a good start, an early 2-0 lead, 7 hits off Graveman in 2+ innings, and you're thinking it had a chance to be like it was Saturday, where they exploded early on and never really looked back, and instead they let Graveman kind of squeeze out of a couple jams after that, and then Jeremy Hellickson, who looked pretty darn good over the first 3 innings, you know, a couple tough luck things happened. You know, the cue shot down the inside the first base bag, a bad decision by Chris Davis on a ball that he should have just taken the out at first base, instead tries to go home, gives the A's an extra out, and then the 3-run homer, and you look up and suddenly it's 5-2, and really the A's never looked back after that. I mean, just, you know, I don't think Sunday would have been nearly as bad if not for the fact that they blew Friday night's game. Sunday, I mean, it's not like a 2-0 lead is, you know, something that's insurmountable for Oakland to come back. And if they had just lost and it still would have been taking 3 out of 4, you would have felt okay about that. I mean, maybe not great, because you'd say, well, they had a chance to win Sunday. But when you put those two together, it's hard not to look at this weekend and just say, I mean, it's just a missed opportunity, especially when if you've been monitoring all these other wild card teams. You know, all these teams are just barely hovering above 500 or right below, and I think I saw a crazy stat over the weekend that I want to say it was 5 different teams have had at least a share of the second AL wildcard spot since Wednesday.
Oh.
5 different teams. I give the nod to Sweeney Murdy up in Yankee land for tweeting that out. I saw that on Sunday evening.
Well, it really has been incredible, right? Because, like, all the teams that were up, Tampa, Kansas City 2 weeks ago, are down. Seattle as well. I mean, Seattle's playing horrible baseball right now as we get out there.
Yeah.
And then, the Orioles and Seattle have been more like sort of treading water. And here come the Angels, and now here come the Twins. And
the Twins who sold, by the way, 2
right,
weeks
exactly.
ago. I mean, it's just no one. It just, you feel like no one really wants to take charge of this thing. And as much as you can keep looking at the Orioles and say, well, they're still in it, they're still in it, they're still in it, I feel like we said this is 2015 all over again. I mean, it was the same story then, that they hung in it until they collapsed at the end of August and lost 12-13, and then they were out of it. But at some point, you got to start stacking some wins. And yeah, they had a nice stretch where they played well, and they had the nice homestand, and you're going on the road. And yes, it's a West Coast trip, but you're facing the Angels, who, I get it, they're playing well right now, but when the Orioles arrived in Anaheim, they weren't on a long winning streak or anything like that. That's a team that they really, if you go back and look at that series, they should have taken 2 out of 3. And now you look at this Oakland series, they certainly should have taken 3 out of 4 at the very least. So instead, they're 3-4 going into the final 3-game set of this trip. And I know it's not easy winning on the road. I know it's not easy playing on the West Coast. And even when the Orioles have been at their best over the last 5 or 6 years, they haven't always gone out to the West and played particularly well. But at some point, you got to make your move. And it feels like every time they get to within a game of 500, and they did get back to the 500 mark last week, but it feels like every time
they go on the road.
or they drop 1 or 2 more, and then they're back to 2 or 3 under again. It's just it's the ultimate 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, and they're just not getting the kind of traction that you'd like to get. The good news is none of these other teams are really getting that unless suddenly you're a big believer in the Angels or the Twins, which to me, they're just the latest teams playing well. I'm not necessarily buying them continuing this either, but
I'm believing them this week, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's just I don't believe in any of these teams, and that's probably the kindest thing that you can say about the Orioles right now is that I don't really like any of these other teams either. But
they kicked the Royals in the teeth 2 weeks ago, and they haven't been right since, right?
Yeah. I mean, the Royals have just been they've been dreadful. They did win two in a row over the weekend to kind of stop the bleeding a little bit, but they were the team that looked like they were looking like they could challenge the Yankees for the top wild card, and it just kind of has fallen apart for them. So I don't know. I mean, I guess the saving grace is that the Orioles overall have pitched better since the All-Star break. Overall, even though Sunday certainly wasn't a reflection of that, they've swung the bats much better. But it's just and even if they're getting those things, you have the bullpen not do the job on Friday night. They just feel like they're just good enough to hang in it, but just bad enough to not be able to capitalize on it. That's what it kind of feels like to me, and it kind of feels like it still feels to me like this is more like the race to be 81-81.
Well, if you like the A's this week, you'll like them even more next week because they're coming in here, the Orioles, with 3 more in Seattle and 2 evening games, then an afternoon, 3:40 start, first pitch on Wednesday in Seattle. They'll get a day off on Thursday, travel home, and then the L.A. Angels come in over the weekend, so you could see Parker Bridwell up close on Sunday if you wish at Camden Yards, then Oakland and Boston in, so they will get a little taste of, hey, man, we're getting up on the end of August now. Don't look now, but the American League East is going to come back around the corner here pretty soon, and the Yankees and the Red Sox are kicking each other around a little bit. Old friend on Monday night, Gallardo. How about that, Luke?
Yeah, Giovanni Gallardo with that 5.38 ERA, which, funny enough,
would have made him our number 2 starter.
Although I'll say this, pitching in Seattle is a different animal than pitching at Camden Yards. He was in their bullpen for quite a while as well. But yeah, we're going to see Giovanni Gallardo, and we'll see if Kevin Gausman and Wade Miley and Ubaldo Jimenez, who Gausman more so and Jimenez more so, but even Miley good in his last start. You're hoping they can give you a chance to win, and you'd as much as it's tough to expect a sweep, boy, you'd really like to win at least 2 out of 3 here. If you can do that, it's a 500 road trip. It's not what you wanted, but it's better than the alternative of going 2-8 or 3-7, and suddenly you find yourself back 3-4 games below 500. So, if they can try to win 2 out of 3 here, it'd be pretty big for them coming home and hoping they can continue to play well at home, which they have for most of the season. There's only so much I expect from this team on the road at this point. It's just who they are. So, if they can win 2 out of 3 and then come home and take care of business, they'll find themselves right there because it's a hot potato second wild card in the American League. How's that?
Let me open up a little can of worms here with you, Luke, because sure. I know we've talked about this earlier in the year. I got into a little bit of a Twitter war with Adam Jones back in, April or May. It was right before the incident in Boston that I was on his side of that Twitter war, by the way. But the jaking it thing and the half running it out thing and the double play that they unwittingly hit into on Sunday where they didn't even try to run or they pull up or Chris Davis is making bad decisions. I saw Machado admire a ball off the top of the wall that he thought was a home run, and he barely made it into second base, and the A's were kicking the ball around. He probably could have made it to third base. I don't like that in Little League. I don't like that in Pinochle. I did not like that when I managed radio personalities. I don't like half speed. I don't run at half speed. I don't mail it in, not ever. And I sort of like my ball players that way. I know Buck does too. Am I being too hard on the Beeve, or, am I seeing things here when Jim Palmer has to make excuses for guys not running the ball out that one time being the time when they hit into a double play?
Well, I think across the board you're being a little. I think there are a couple guys you can point to. We know this story with Machado. I mean, it's just unless you just want to bench him and look. I mean, there's some managers that would sit him down. I mean, Matt Williams got into a huge. A war with Bryce Harper a couple years ago, and probably one of the things that led to Matt Williams losing his job, quite frankly. What happened on Sunday specifically with Seth Smith, it was a weird play. He should have run. Davis should have run. I think the ball did hit his hand in defense of him, but you can't assume there. I think Seth Smith's just not a very good base runner. We saw him run into a couple outs in Anaheim. I think he's a solid hitter against right-handed pitching. I think he's a decent on-base guy. I still like that trade, but I think you've kind of seen some of the warts of his game that have made him expendable in the eyes of his past teams. I think you've seen that. I don't think I don't think it's a chronic issue, top to bottom on the roster. I think over 162 games, these types of things, every team's going to have some of it. And I would even venture to guess, even the Orioles of yesteryear, as much as we try to romanticize the past, it happened before. It happens too much with Manny Machado. I completely agree with that. I'm not going to sugarcoat that or make excuses for that. I know it's been addressed. I know it's, at some point you chalk it up to Manny being Manny, and you don't like it, but you kind of...
The last Manny who was Manny Ramirez, and that wasn't a compliment.
No, it's not a compliment at all. But, and in the case of Seth Smith, I just don't think he's a very good base runner. I think Sunday specifically, I thought that was a weird play. I'll say this. I think Bobby Dickerson, and it was lost in Saturday night's game because they ended up winning, but him getting a runner thrown out in the top of the first inning
with nobody
when they and you know me, I've said this before, I've been more of a supporter of Bobby Dickerson than most, just from the standpoint of if you really think about it and break down the odds and you think about what the probability, with two outs, when you send a runner to the plate, what are the odds of him making it compared to what the odds are of the next hitter getting on base, continuing the inning, getting the run in? I think in most cases, third base coaches are way too conservative. And why? Because it's easy. Because you save face. No one criticizes the third base coach who holds the runner up because he doesn't get thrown out. But I think this was a case on Saturday. I mean, it was maddening. I didn't tweet about it because I was actually eating some crabs at the time.
Well, they were scoring 2 runs en route to 7 or whatever it was.
Yeah, and it ended up being completely inconsequential because they won by 7 runs. But that was an example of a play where I was just thinking, why are you and it was Jonathan Scope he sent. Why are you getting Jonathan Scope thrown out at the plate with nobody out and Adam Jones and Trey Mancini? Or no, it was Trey Mancini coming up next. One of your 2 best hitters this season. There's been some stuff like that. I think there have been some times where guys try to do too much, and other times where guys are lacking focus, or just a couple guys that aren't particularly good base runners.
It hasn't been nearly as good heads-up ball, the way my dad would say it, the way heads-up baseball that they won with in 11 and 12 and 13. Like these last couple of years, this year has not been that. I would not say this is a good fundamental team. I would not say this team hustles all the time. I wouldn't. This team makes good decisions because I've watched them play, and look, that's not That's not the reason they're a sub-500 team, but it's part of the symptom.
Yeah, it is. And like I said, I don't think it's a top-to-bottom issue. I think it's a couple players here and there who have that issue for whatever reason, whether it's focus. I don't know if it's attitude, whatever. I mean, in the case of Seth Smith, I don't think it's a guy jaking it. I think he just wasn't very good awareness. I think he lost his mind for a second there, assuming that a call was going to be made, and you can never assume in a situation like that.
Yeah, why not run it out and then maybe you'll get the call?
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's something to be said. I guess, and it's the old check swing with a wild pitch where you don't want to look guilty. You want to say, hey, I didn't swing, and then you get thrown out. But I mean, it's one of those things that honestly, it probably happened a little bit more than we remember in 2014 or 2012. It's just they won more, and when you win more, you overlook your deficiencies a little bit more. When you lose, those deficiencies are highlighted way more. It's been an issue at times. I won't disagree with that.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke out on Twitter. He'll be up late with the Orioles and awaiting the Ravens in Miami on Thursday. Man, we're just like churning through this, right? Like when they're not really in the race, we're up late, we're watching, we're waiting on football. We know how bad that's been. This is a tough month around here right now, right?
It really is. It feels like so much spinning of wheels, doesn't it? I mean, with the Ravens right now, it's trying to figure out the injury situation and the offensive line and just trying, Joe Flacco being the biggest kind of treading water factor for that team. And
there's nobody more substantial to a city than Joe Flacco right now.
Yeah.
If he's not right, this is really not going to go well for about 4 months.
Sure. And with the Orioles, I mean, it's I give them credit that they've manned up to the point where this team was 7 games under 500 after that Cubs series, and I flat out wrote it that the season was pretty much over there and that they should have been sellers. And I still think they should have been sellers, by the way. I haven't changed my opinion on that just because they have played above 500, a couple games over 500.
Yeah, when you and I are getting on a plane to go to the ALCS to Cleveland.
Yeah, and you never know. And I mean, look what happened in 1996.
Hey, we were both big sellers. We can't go back on that now. We can't turn back time. We can lie about it if we were politicians, we could do that. But no, but we can't do that. I mean, we were all in on trading, and hell, I was all in on trading for, trading Machado, but time will tell a year and a half from now. That's the beauty of this argument. I don't get to say I told you so until like a year and a half from now when all these guys are gone. But for now, I'm going to stick with I told you so.
Yeah, and I mean it's also one of those things where go back and look at 1996. And you know it very well. You've written about it. But the Orioles didn't trade Bobby Bonilla and David Wells, 2 guys who were not on that 98-win 1997 team. The pieces that they could have acquired for those guys. Or, had there been another hypothetical trade that they'd made?
Dude, I'm going through the Peter Principles right now to find the quote. I want to do the Angelo's voice for it.
And my point being
sometimes the experts don't know as much as guys like me.
Right. And the point being there that sometimes you might find a short-term gain with that, but there still might be a long-term consequence or a long-term missed opportunity. How's that in the case of maybe they make the second wild card, and maybe they beat the Yankees in the wild card game and they get to the division series, and I'm guessing their run would end at that point, but who knows?
But hey, dude, it's August 15th-ish, and they're still in it, and there's nobody better than them fighting for this. I mean, I look at it and say, well, they're in over their head, but they got to play good baseball for the next 6 weeks. Good baseball means running the ball out and not getting thrown out at home plate and getting some quality starts, and Zach Britton not coming out of the bullpen and giving up 450-foot home runs, and just all the way around.
Given up in over a year, by the way.
Okay, well, fair enough.
But yeah, I mean, there's no question. They have to play better. I mean, look, I'm not so sure that the second wild card is going to be an 89-win team as it was last year when the Orioles and the Blue Jays both finished 89, with 89 wins. But at the same time, you would think, 86 wins, 87 wins. I mean, you would think one of these teams maybe gets to that point, but maybe not. Maybe we have an 84 and 78 second wild card team. I mean, it would certainly be strange and kind of go against what you would tend to think. But as I pointed out to you the other day, I mean, you look at all these teams that are in this race. From the Angels, who are the current second wild card holder, down to even the Rangers, who are trying to hang in. The Rangers are the only team out of those 7 quote contenders who have a positive run differential, and it's only +10. I mean, the rest of these teams have all allowed more runs than they've scored, and that's typically a pretty good, eyeball litmus test for the true quality of a team, and kind of eliminates that luck factor that the 2012 Orioles had, that the Rangers of last year had with all the one-run wins. That run differential is usually a pretty good predictor of how teams are going to perform the rest of the way, and if that's the case, then you don't necessarily think any of these teams are going to suddenly catch fire and reel off 17 of 20 or something like that.
Can you imagine if 4 of these teams are playing 5-12 ball the last week of September? I mean, it could be exciting, right?
It could be very exciting in the same way that we talk about a bunch of 7 and 8 teams going into Week 17 in the NFL having a chance at the last wild card spot. It's exciting. Is it particularly good for the league or good for the quality of the product? Probably not, but as far as keeping eyeballs engaged, I think Rob Manfred would certainly be happy with that scenario, even if it's not going to be a team to remember from a quality standpoint.
They didn't look very engaged in Oakland over the weekend.
Yeah, it was just such a blah weekend. I mean, Friday night was bitterly disappointing. I mean, that's one where you really felt that they had a chance to, kind of be back to 500 and suddenly looking like they were in position to move above 500. They lose that one. Yeah, they won Saturday. It was nice to see that, but then Sunday it missed opportunities early, and then Jeremy Hellickson some bad fortune, and then made some really bad pitches to compound that.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke out on Twitter, as well as Luke at WNST.net, our resident insider here. You can find all of our work out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device. Just download the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear. Our morning newspaper ships to your email inbox and is beloved by all. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where it's still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life. We are going to get in shape walking around London next month. If you're headed to London in the Wembley game, we're throwing a huge party on Saturday. All details up at WNST.net. You can also toss me an email. We're doing a Purple Sky takeover on the cable cars headed over to the O2 Arena on Saturday afternoon. We hope you come and march with us. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. And don't forget that our breaking news text service is still there. It's always bad news, which sucks, but it's the truth. And it's always on time, and it's always brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. And, of course, Dennis will be here on Thursday getting you ready for Miami and fake football and no Joe Flacco. Such is life in the preseason. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.